Hello everybody, welcome back to another episode of Access Blockbusters Pod, and guys, we have a jam-packed episode. You know, last week I was thinking about it a little bit, and again, apologies for last episode. I had lost my voice a little bit, so I know when I was listening back to the audio files just to, edit and make sure that the episode was okay, that, my voice did sound a little bit worse for wear. And so I apologize for that. And if hopefully we're back to our usual vigor and whatever you make of this voice. If you're listening to the podcast, thank you so much. I guess that means it's a good sign. So anyways, yeah, apologies for last week. But, last week's episode, there wasn't a whole lot to talk about. Fortunately, we had the Rings of Power, but it was a little bit of a different episode last week where we talked about Ted Lasso. We talked about Sigourney Weaver joining Mandalorian. And obviously we talked about Rings of Power as well. But now we come, it's amazing how much can change a week later. That's why I love doing these podcast episodes, because some weeks it's just, there's something you love, like Deadpool and Wolverine comes out. And then there are other weeks like this where, oh my goodness, there are so many things to talk about. This is going to be one of the most jam-packed episodes of Access Blockbusters Pod. So a lot of different segments, a lot of different clips going up on the channel, hopefully in the next coming days. But in this episode, guys, if you're here to listen to the whole thing, I'm excited to talk about all these different things, and I hope that you guys are as well. And again, this is a conversation. So before we get into the episode proper, make sure to subscribe to the Access Blockbusters YouTube channel if you're listening on the YouTube channel. If you're listening on Spotify, make sure to give the podcast a rating, but also head on over to the YouTube channel as well. Subscribe and leave a comment down below. Again, like I said, this is a conversation. This is not just, it is just me right now talking into a microphone, but the reason I do this is because I know that there are so many of you listening, and it just blows my mind every week to see how many people are listening. And even more importantly, exponentially more importantly than that, there are people in the comments talking and having, really fun thoughts and discussions about what we're talking about here. So it's not just about me talking, it's about all of us having a conversation about it. So subscribe, give this video a like. I try to respond to every single comment that comes on the YouTube channel as long as it's appropriate. And so, yeah, really appreciate you guys hanging out here with me today. Access Blockbusters Pod, episode 39. We are approaching the 40 mark. We're going to be approaching the 50 mark in the next couple months, which is incredible. I picked up the podcast again in full force this year. I had been doing it on and off for the past couple years, but I think, just thinking about hitting episode 100 someday, it's amazing. But let's not get too ahead of ourselves. Let's dive into these topics before, I start rambling too much more. So first topic up, we have, I think, just something to celebrate, and a little bit of a narrative shift, if you will, although things can change. I think this, the fact that we're talking about $2 billion films here, when a couple years ago, even a year ago, we were talking about how Disney is dead. And granted, there are still those who would say Disney is dead in the water and these are just flukes and aberrations. And we'll talk about that. But, we're here to talk about Inside Out 2 and Deadpool and Wolverine and their huge box office success and box office milestones and what this means for Disney. So, if you're one of the only people who hasn't seen either Inside Out 2 or Deadpool and Wolverine, and I mean that in jest, but I also kind of mean it seriously, because it seems like nobody who watches movies has not seen these two films, and I'm going to read out some numbers to you that explain why that is. But Inside Out 2 and Deadpool and Wolverine, these are the two, really arguably the two of the bigger films that were coming out this summer in general. Right? I think Disney had a point in saying, okay, Marvel, which has been on a little bit of a downtrend recently. And even, critically, if you disagree, like if you really enjoy all the projects, that's great. That's awesome. I've done plenty of videos on all the different projects that have come out in phases 4 and 5, and, varying thoughts on all of them, but I enjoy most of them, but still not to the extent that I did the Infinity Saga. But still, I think even, you'd have to acknowledge the facts, the objective facts. We're not talking about now our thoughts on these films, but just the box office, right? The box office has been declining. And obviously a pandemic was a huge part of it, but, we did have little hits here and there, obviously, and I say little, facetiously. Doctor Strange 2 made $900 million. Guardians of the Galaxy 3 made $800 million. Spider-Man No Way Home almost made $2 billion. So, Marvel has had its wins, but then you have the Marvels and your Thor: Love and Thunders and your Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumanias of the world, and so it was a big question, right? Could Marvel kind of get back on the right track, especially with some interesting films coming up like Captain America: Brave New World? Sorry, not Captain America. Yeah, but Captain America: Brave New World. I keep getting the titles, the old title and the new title mixed up. Captain America: Brave New World. Coming out soon, and then Thunderbolts and Fantastic Four: First Step. So it's exciting, but it's also it's kind of a wait and see period for Marvel. So then they released Deadpool and Wolverine. We'll talk about the box office of that in just a second. On the flip side, with Pixar, with Inside Out 2, you had a film that, well, I think myself included, because I've mentioned on the channel before, Inside Out 1 is one of my favorite films of all time. I love this film to death. I think that it's one of the shining examples of how you make a film for everybody and not just, pander, but actually make a film that children can love, but also adults can really dive into the themes of sadness and emotion. And so to say that, we're going to make a sequel it just jarred me a little bit, because it was like, you can't make a sequel to that. Turns out you can. And turns out not only did I love Inside Out 2, I want Inside Out 3. And I don't say that lightly. Like, I liked Toy Story 4 a lot, actually, even though I was one of the people who said, why in the world are we making Toy Story 4? I'm not clamoring for Toy Story 5, yet here we are, we're going to get a Toy Story 5. So it's a little bit of a different case in that regard. Before these two films came out, I was of two different minds with both Inside Out 2 and Deadpool and Wolverine. Deadpool and Wolverine, and I made a predictions video. That's part of the fun of having a YouTube channel and a podcast, is that you can go back, in the records. You can look at all the previous podcast episodes. I have everything set here. I'm not here to pretend or to bluster. I make predictions and I'm wrong, usually a lot of the time. But one of the predictions I made before Deadpool and Wolverine was that it would make $1 billion. And I don't think that was a super bold prediction. I just think it was something that, we'll have to see. But I was very confident in that. Sure enough, Deadpool and Wolverine has made over $1 billion and is doing quite well for itself. It was actually recently, again, number one at the box office, which is incredible over the weekend. But Inside Out 2, the first Inside Out, I believe, made something like $600 or $700 million. It was very, very successful for a film, especially for a first-time original animated film from Pixar, even though Pixar does usually do pretty well. To say that I would have expected something like $1 billion from Inside Out 2, I would have given it maybe a 5% chance. I would have said I would love it if it happened, and I do love that it did happen, but there's just no way. Because, who is coming out to see Inside Out 2 that hadn't seen Inside Out 1? And, what is the repeat value that it would get to $1 billion when, this is a film that didn't need to make $1 billion to be successful, quite frankly. I think that that's what set my expectations a lot lower, was the fact that I said, well, Inside Out 2, if it makes $1 billion, that's awesome, but it needed to make maybe like $700 million to be successful, and that was great for it. So here are the numbers. Right. And I want to talk about the numbers for a little bit, and then I want to talk about Disney in general, because I want to see, I want to talk about whether or not this means Disney is back, quote unquote. But here are the numbers. Inside Out 2 is the number 1 grossing film of the year. Deadpool and Wolverine is the number 2 grossing film of the year. And these are worldwide numbers, by the way. Although I believe domestically, they should be pretty close to 1 and 2, if not 1 and 2 themselves. Inside Out 2 is currently the number 9 grossing film of all time worldwide, at $1.668 billion. Wrap your head around that. This film has made more than the Avengers, and it's made more, scratch that, than basically every single MCU film except for the 2 Avengers films, Avengers Infinity War and Avengers Endgame. And Spider-Man No Way Home, I guess, to be fair. But that's a Sony film. But it's made more than, I don't know, like, think of almost all of your favorite films. It's made more than the Lord of the Rings films, all the Harry Potter films, a lot. In fact, I think every single Pixar film, because Toy Story 3 is the next one, I think, at 1.1 or 1.2 billion. It's incredible. Inside Out 2 is the number 9 grossing film ever worldwide. It's beat out Star Wars films like The Last Jedi and Rise of Skywalker, which both made over $1 billion, Rogue One as well. It's actually incredible what it's been able to do. And the reason that part of the reason we're bringing it up is because it just recently became officially, and I know that there's some debate about this, it just officially became the number 1 animated film of all time worldwide. The reason I say that is because technically, on a technicality, there are 2 ways to look at this in my opinion. The technical and, yes, I guess the legalistic, real interpretation of the number 2 film animated is The Lion King, which is the 2019 Lion King, not the 1993, I believe 1994 version of The Lion King. Could be wrong about that. But it's the 2019 version of The Lion King, which is animated in the sense that it's entirely CGI, except for one shot of the film. But, I would buy into that as, sort of the technical, legalistic answer to that question. So yes, Inside Out 2, for all intents and purposes, has beat out the number 2 animated film of all time, which is The Lion King, which is at 1.652 billion. Also just incredible how many people saw that movie. And also the prequel's coming out. Mufasa, The Lion King is coming out in just a couple months. So that's interesting. But, you know, if you wanted to kind of go by the spirit, like CG, not CG animated, because Lion King is also CG animated, but you know what I mean? Like sort of the traditional kind of animated style. It had already long passed the previous record holder of that kind of animation, which is Frozen 2, which is number 14, also incredible. Number 14 all-time at $1.453 billion. So Disney just killing it out here with its animation. But Inside Out 2 dethrones them all. And by the way, I mean, just what an amazing film. I think that, you know, I was so shocked to hear that it made $1.66 billion. But honestly, aside from maybe even the first Inside Out film, this is one of the most deserving animated films to ever make this much money. I'm just really happy, honestly, more than the money, that this many people went out to see Inside Out 2. It's truly remarkable. So hats off to Inside Out 2. It's really great. Now, Deadpool and Wolverine is competing with a lot of MCU films, right? And it's still managing to beat out most of them. I think the only MCU films that it is under right now, and it probably won't go too much higher than where it is right now, but it's under, obviously, Avengers Endgame, number 1, Avengers Infinity War, number 2, and you have Spider-Man No Way Home, and then I believe the first Avengers, excuse me, the first Avengers at 1.5 or 1.6 billion, and then followed by Civil War, I believe. I believe actually it's past Civil War, or it's about to pass Civil War if it hasn't already. But I think also Avengers Age of Ultron, I said, is up there. Iron Man 3, I think it just passed. So it's getting up there in the ranks of all of these. And by all of, I really mean all of these billion-dollar MCU films. I mean, in the Infinity Saga alone, Captain Marvel, Black Panther, you know, obviously all the Avengers films have made over $1 billion, and 2 of them made over $2 billion. So it's incredible. But still, despite all that, Deadpool and Wolverine is at number 23 all time of the worldwide box office charts at 1.266 billion. And honestly, who's to say it can't hit 1.3? Probably won't. I mean, almost definitely won't. But, you know, I checked AMC the other day. It's still playing in theaters near me, in pretty big theaters near me. And so I thought, yeah, I mean, is it likely it's going to hit 1.3? No. Does it need to hit 1.3 to be successful? No, because it's already insanely successful. And think about this, guys. And maybe not many, because the 2 times I went to see Deadpool and Wolverine, I believe both times there were children in the audience. So take this for what you will. Because I do think a lot of children did go to see Deadpool and Wolverine. Whether or not that was good parenting, I leave that up for debate in the comments down below. But regardless of that, there is a segment of the population that would have gone to Deadpool and Wolverine had it been PG or PG-13, and would have gone over and over again. Because you can take your kid, I would wager, to about 75% of the MCU films and feel pretty safe about it. I mean, like Winter Soldier, you know, maybe a little bit too violent for maybe a younger child or something like that. But, you know, like a Thor Ragnarok, I think you can take a 10 or 12-year-old. So anyways, point being is that there's a good chunk of the population that didn't buy tickets. I mean, parents included, taking those kids to see Deadpool and Wolverine. I'm sure they'll watch it eventually. But yeah, I mean, it's just incredible that there's that much of a you know, kind of a hurdle that it had to climb as the first R-rated MCU film. For comparison, by the way, the only other billion-dollar rated R film is Joker, and also timely, you know, speaking of Lion King having Mufasa coming out soon. Joker 2, Folie, Deux is coming out in just a couple weeks, so we'll talk about Joker 2. Joker 2 is going to be the headliner of today's podcast, because I just find this saga so interesting and fascinating with the reviews. But, you know, Joker 2 is coming out soon, but Joker 1 just surprised everyone. It's number 39 overall in the worldwide box office, sitting at $1.078 billion. So just really remarkable. Now, as we close out this segment of the podcast, just want to talk quickly about Disney in general, because a couple years ago, you know, post-pandemic, post-Bob Chapek, Disney was in a bad spot. You know, it's still not in a great spot in terms of its content. I mean, Marvel is still trying to get it back together. I think they're heading in the right direction. And, you know, Thunderbolts, Cap 4, Fantastic Four look like really purposeful, kind of feel more like the phases 1, 2, and 3 kind of MCU films. Agatha, Ironheart, Wonder Man, you know, wavering a little bit on that, but we'll see about that. Pixar, I think, is really headed in a great direction. Where I talked about this when Incredibles 3 was announced. I think it's a great direction to be heading, where you have one original film, one sequel, one original film, one sequel, and you just kind of alternate like that. They're so good at both now. Whereas, you know, if it was just sequels, it'd be like, okay, you know, let's kind of slow down a little bit there. But it's I think doing these original films in between is a really good thing. So I think Pixar is headed in a good direction. Star Wars, I'm not convinced. I think as long as Kathleen Kennedy is still making creative decisions over there, or of what to greenlight and who to fire and things like that, I'm not convinced that Star Wars is headed in a good direction for a while. You'll have to, show me a couple really good theatrical films and a couple really good shows to convince me that Star Wars is heading in the right direction. But there's always hope, right? A new hope, no pun intended. Pun intended. What am I saying? Who am I kidding? But yeah, I mean, I think that what this proves to me, right, what this shows to me is that things change really quickly. A year ago, like I said, Disney was in a very bad spot. And now, they are ruling the box office. Does this mean that Disney is back? I don't think so. I think that, again, things can change immediately. If Cap 4 bombs, right? If Toy Story 5 bombs. I don't think Toy Story 5 is coming out next year. I think it's coming out in 2026. But, just as an example, right? If Moana 2 bombs, Zootopia 2 bombs, and they're bad and they look like cheap sequels that nobody really asked for, but Disney greenlit to try to make money, then yeah, Disney's going to be right back at square one. I mean, Mufasa and Snow White, kind of have me a little bit nervous because it's like, okay, we're kind of heading back to that live action remake. Well, we'll see about that. But again, I think that it's still a really good, encouraging sign. You'd obviously rather have this than the alternative, and I think it's just a lesson to say that we can get excited for any given year. It's not just like it doesn't have to be that Disney is sinking and then Deadpool and Wolverine comes out and nobody watches it because of Disney. It's like, no, I mean, Marvel can be in a not as great place, and I'm sure Deadpool and Wolverine could have made more money if it came out around Endgame for sure. But I think the bottom line here is that, I think we're headed in a better direction. And I think that there's only hope that can continue to bring us up. So let me know in the comments down below if you think Disney is headed in the right direction and what you think about these two, in my opinion, fantastic films, Inside Out 2 and Deadpool and Wolverine, making over $1 billion very easily. Let me know in the comments down below. Now, let's pivot to something that when I read this headline, I frankly scratched my head. And I feel like I do this a lot when James Gunn makes announcements about his DCU. I feel like I scratch my head and go, okay, why? What is the point of this? But usually he ends up being right. And I say that because I say usually because we just haven't seen enough of what his DCU is going to look like. Creature Commandos, I've said looks exactly like every single film in the comic book space that he's ever made. Guardians of the Galaxy, Peacemaker, Suicide Squad, it looks the exact same. So we'll see if he can do something different with that and with Superman. But James Gunn, I think, has a very specific direction. I think recently on X or Twitter or whatever, or Facebook or whatever he was using, Instagram, replied to a comment where somebody asked him, what are you going to title if you're going to make a Batman and Superman film? What are you going to title it? And he's going to call it World's Finest. And I think that, you see that, I don't know if the marketing team is going to get behind that decision. I think that if he had his way, he would have called the new Batman film that's being directed by Andy Muschietti, he would have called it Brave and the Bold, just Brave and the Bold. I doubt the marketing team's going to let him get away with that. I think it reminds me of when the last X-Men film, Dark Phoenix, came out, that they just didn't want to use the X-Men title for some reason. I don't know why. I mean, you could just, refer to it as Dark Phoenix. Like, we don't call it, X-Men Days of Future, it's just Days of Future Past or Apocalypse or Winter Soldier, whatever, right? So I don't, I think if James Gunn had his way, he would call it Brave and the Bold. But he has a very particular taste. My point is that he has a very particular taste when it comes to comics, and for better, usually for better, rarely for worse. But we'll see. He has a particular vision, and he sticks with it. So we'll see. Creature Commandos is the first project in the canon DCU. Although I would suspect Suicide Squad and Peacemaker will both be just part of the canon at some point, with Blue Beetle kind of being that way for a while. And so we've gotten, I've done a podcast episode where I went through all the different projects that have been quote unquote announced by James Gunn, even though there have been more things that have been announced since then. And now we have a new rumor coming out, and there's a project that I read the title of this and I went, I genuinely, because it's I'm not a big comic book reader. But usually when a project is announced, I go, oh, I've heard of that character, like Miss Marvel or She-Hulk or Booster Gold. I've heard of these characters. This one, I frankly couldn't tell you anything about this character. It's been rumored that there is going to be a Sergeant Rock movie set in the DCU. Now, if you're like me, you read that, or you're hearing this now on the podcast and you're going, what in the world? Who in the world is Sergeant Rock? So I've done just a little bit of preliminary research to get us up to speed before we talk about what this might mean for the DCU or whatever's going on. Sergeant Rock, and I am blanking on his alter ego right now, but is basically a military commander in World War II. That's the gist of it from what I found. He does not have superpowers, which is something that I made a point of trying to look up, like, what are his powers? Does he have any? He does not have superpowers. He's basically he's a sergeant. He's a military commander, and he commands a group called Easy Company, which I think will, from what I heard, will be featured in Creature Commandos or will be featured in Superman, one of the two. So that's interesting. Things are connecting already. Not only that, though, but we have reports of a director and a writer. So the duo, and I'm going to butcher probably both of their names, but the director is Luca Guadagnino. I apologize so profusely for butchering that name. He directed Challengers, the recent film with Zendaya. And then also we have Justin Kuritsky, I think that's how you pronounce it, who also wrote Challengers, and they both worked on a film called Queer, I believe. And so from the reports, it looks like they're going to be directing and writing, and this is going to be a film set in World War II. Now, I can't really comment on their talent because I haven't seen either of the films. But I will say that, it's an interesting choice. I think these are both a filmmaker and a writer who have very specific visions. And so I think that that's interesting to see. And on top of that, having this be a period piece, this isn't like a, Ant-Man and the Wasp kind of film where it just kind of falls in between other things in continuity. This seems like a very pointed film. How this connects to the DCU, I don't know, frankly, because you have Creature Commandos, right? Which is coming out. And the theme of this first chapter of the DCU is gods and monsters. So Creature Commandos makes sense. It looks like there are going to be a lot of really interesting, I don't know if they're gods or if they're monsters, but, people showing up in Superman, Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow. From the comics, it seems like, there's going to be a lot of interesting people showing up there. Batman, obviously, could have some, Man-Bat, I don't know, for example. Swamp Thing, obviously. So a lot of interesting characters that fit that theme. But Sergeant Rock is interesting. It's interesting also that, James Gunn, who is so apt to do, he loves taking these characters that only he really knows. Not, and I say that facetiously, obviously, people read Sergeant Rock comics, I'm sure. I certainly have not, but I haven't read many comics, so take that for what you will. But yeah, there are people who love the character, but James Gunn really has an affinity for these kinds of characters and bringing them to the screen. And so we'll see. We'll have to see what this means. The fact that they have space for this on their slate, because look, I think there's a couple practical considerations to take when you're talking about these things, right? Would I like to see, oversaturation aside, would I like to see, really niche characters get their day in the sun? Would I like to see a Calendar Man movie or show? Like, sure, why not? We're getting a Kite Man animated show, which was really fun, based on the Harley Quinn animated show. But that's, those are just sort of in their own corner, right? So the fact that, there's room in his slate to have a Sergeant Rock movie, because these are movies. These take a long time to produce and make. And it's not like he's going to be releasing, like the MCU was at a time, 4 movies in a year. He's going to be doing, I think, two movies and 2 shows is what he said per year. And so, with all the other films that are in production and starting to enter pre-production, Sergeant Rock is just a really interesting choice. We'll have to see what this means for the overall narrative. Maybe by the time we get there in, maybe 2028 or 2029, 2030 even, probably not 2030, but maybe we'll have just a really robust understanding of how Sergeant Rock fits into the DCU, excuse me. But for now, I don't, I'm not skeptical because I just don't know enough to really make up my mind. But you'll have to let me know in the comments down below. Either A, are you a huge Sergeant Rock fan, and are you just screaming at me in the comments? And please tell me everything there is to know about this character. I'd love to hear. And B, are you a fan of the directing and writing duo? I'm not going to try to pronounce their names again because I'm going to butcher them. But are you a fan of their work? And what do you think about them joining the project? And also just being a period piece. Let me know in the comments down below. Speaking of DC news, though, we have some more coming up here, which I think kind of makes up for the lack of DC news last week. We have a couple big stories here. The first of which obviously was, we just talked about Sergeant Rock, but this is a more prominent character. Green Lantern, Hal Jordan specifically, because, for better and for worse, we had the Ryan Reynolds Green Lantern film in 2011, I believe, or 2009, something like that. And that did not go well. Ryan Reynolds, infamously as Deadpool, makes fun of his character, mercilessly, just wherever he can. He thinks of it as just a big kind of joke to him now. The film just wasn't received very well. But I think, Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds met on that set, I believe. So something good came out of that, I suppose. But we have, we've had confirmation for a while, ever since James Gunn did his big initial DCU Phase 1, Chapter 1, whatever, slate reveal a couple years ago on that YouTube video. We've had confirmation that they are going to be doing an HBO show called Lanterns, which is going to be a true crime kind of detective story, right? Which I think is fun. I think that's a really interesting idea. They're going to be investigating something on Earth, I think, although with some intergalactic implications is what I remember him saying. So I think that's really exciting. Now, we're also getting a Green Lantern in Superman, because Green Lanterns, it's a mantle, it's a group, Green Lantern Corps. And so we're getting Guy Gardner, who is probably my, one of the Green Lanterns I know the least about. But still, we're getting Guy Gardner in Superman, so really interested, played by Nathan Fillion, one of James Gunn's good friends. But, I think that a lot of us expected, is it Kilowog? I believe that's his name. Or you have, obviously, Jon Stewart, who I think is going to be in Lanterns, and then also Hal Jordan. I think it just makes a lot of sense to have Hal Jordan in whatever kind of role. It doesn't have to be the lead of Lanterns, but Hal Jordan is kind of the Peter Parker of Green Lanterns, right? It's the most synonymous, which we're kind of branching away from that now with Miles Morales, and now you have, Guy Gardner and Jon Stewart. So really interesting stuff here. But apparently, according to a source that's generally pretty reliable, Jess Snyder, we have we have the casting that DC Studios, headed by James Gunn, wants for Hal Jordan. And it really was somebody I was not expecting at all. And I think that's shame on me, right? Because I just know Hal Jordan from the comics and just sort of the vibe that he has, the image that he portrays of himself. And it just felt more like a younger, youthful spirit. Not to say that the actors that I'm about to talk about don't have that younger, youthful spirit. But, Ryan Reynolds, right? Ryan Reynolds 15 years ago, that's sort of the archetype for Hal Jordan. Well, apparently, DC is looking at none other than Thanos Cable himself, also Gurney Halleck from Dune, Josh Brolin to play Hal Jordan. Now, this is really interesting because in conjunction with that, it's not like it's like Josh Brolin's our number one choice, but Tom Holland is our number two choice or whatever. Josh Brolin is apparently the number one choice to play Hal Jordan, right? But number 2/2A, 2B, whatever, it's not listed, but these are the two other choices that they have to play Hal Jordan if Josh Brolin declines, allegedly. Matthew McConaughey and Ewan McGregor. Now, this is really interesting because if this is true, we can actually glean a lot about this character and how James Gunn wants to use him in the DCU. Because obviously, none of these three actors are in their 30s, right? They're not the same age and I'm not saying this to be demeaning at all. They're in great shape. They look, fantastic for their age. They're still doing action movies. Ewan McGregor was Obi-Wan just a couple years ago. Obviously, Josh Brolin was Thanos and he was Cable and everything. He's doing Dune. So yeah, I mean, no disrespect in that regard at all. But they're not like Tom Holland, Timothée Chalamet kind of age, right? If you're talking about people that I might have thought would have played Hal Jordan, just throwing random names out there of frankly white dudes who were around Ryan Reynolds' age at the time. But yeah, I mean, it's really interesting because now you're looking at more grizzled veterans in Hollywood, right? And I think these three actors are pretty known for playing sort of the mentor role, like the older, wiser, but gruff kind of figure. I mean, Ewan McGregor just recently played Obi-Wan, and he played a version of Obi-Wan that was kind of more not get off my lawn. It wasn't quite that, but just a sadder, more melancholy version of Obi-Wan. Say what you will about the series, I thought Ewan McGregor did what he could with the material. McConaughey is, he can do the star kind of role, but he can also do a Dallas Buyers Club. He can be very dramatic as well. And then Josh Brolin obviously can bring just a lot of weight and presence with whatever he does. So I think it's interesting because I think Lanterns is going to be an ensemble, right? So it's not just I don't think that it's going to be one of these three guys or whoever they cast for Hal Jordan eventually. It's not going to. I don't think it's like they're going to be the lead of the show. I think it's going to be an ensemble with all the other Lanterns. But I think that it really shows then what these characters and what their place is in the film. I think that they're going to be really, I think a big mentor kind of figure to the other Lanterns, or they're going to kind of be that get off my lawn, I can deal with this myself kind of detective role. But I think that really shows the direction that they're going in with Lanterns to have a character like this. Now, I think that means I don't think just for the sake of the DCU's continuity and having an actor play Green Lantern for a while, it doesn't matter. Jon Stewart, Nathan Fillion is not much younger than Josh Brolin, to be fair. So I think Jon Stewart will probably be the one that'll be much younger. And so, they'll probably target a younger actor just because you want, a Green Lantern to kind of be connected to, because I don't think Josh Brolin is going to be playing Hal Jordan for the next 10 years, right? But I think that will be interesting as well to see who they cast as a Jon Stewart in that role as well. So, yeah, I mean, at first, and I've heard a lot of discourse about this casting, and it's not even official yet, by the way, guys, but, just alleged casting and people being like, this is terrible casting and how could you do this, whatever. I just think that we don't know what the story is that they're going to tell. And I get it if Hal Jordan is your all-time favorite character in the comics, and I get that, right? And you wanted to see him on the big screen for the next 25 years, played by Tom Holland. I keep going back to Tom Holland. I'm sorry. I get that from that perspective. But I think a vast majority of the people who were, quote-unquote, upset about this casting were really just upset because it's like, that's not the Hal Jordan that I would have cast. And I mean, that's not the Hal Jordan you would have cast for the story that you wanted to tell, right? So I just think we should have faith in James Gunn and whoever is going to be writing and directing the show, show running the show, just to say, look, we have faith in this, and we're just going to let you tell your story. And if it's good, it's good. If it's bad, if Josh Brolin ends up being, if he's cast the worst Green Lantern you could possibly imagine, then we'll go back and we'll revisit this, and I'll eat my words. I mean, I'm not even here saying that he's going to be the best Hal Jordan. I just think that I don't know what the story is. So let's wait for a trailer. Let's wait for some plot details, and then we can, start to form our own picture of that. But let me know in the comments. I know this is a more divisive topic here from what I've heard online, but I'm curious to hear what you guys think of Hal Jordan as a cast by, Josh Brolin cast as Hal Jordan potentially. We'll see about that. Now let's pivot from the DCU, and it's funny, we have kind of a grab bag of a lot of different topics here. We have Disney, and then we have a couple DCU films, and this will be the first of two Lord of the Rings topics that we're going to be talking about today. This one, obviously, I'll be talking about the Rings of Power episode 4 in just a little bit, but we have some other Lord of the Rings news to talk about. And this one makes me kind of happy, makes me pretty happy, but also a little bit sad at the same time, and I'll explain why in just a second. So we have long been wondering when the Lord of the Rings will return to the big screen, and I'm not talking about the War of Rohirrim, which is coming out in just a couple months, I believe, or even a couple weeks. I think it's coming out this month. Anyways, I could be wrong. It's coming out before the end of 2024. But, we were wondering, right? Because I think most other franchises like Harry Potter will be, I suppose Harry Potter's not returning to the big screen for a good while, but we had Fantastic Beasts, and now it's going to be an HBO show. But Lord of the Rings, I mean, one of the quintessential, you have, your Star Wars, your Star Treks, but in quote unquote nerddom, it's Harry Potter, it's Star Trek, it's Star Wars, Marvel, DC, and then it's Lord of the Rings, right? Not in that order. I'm just saying, included in that list of greats is Lord of the Rings. It's just a fantastic series of books, fantastic show. I actually, kind of coincidentally, not even, I guess sort of related to Rings of Power, just because I had been seeing it recently, but also just because I've been meaning to reread those books for a long time, have actually just started to reread Fellowship of the Ring, and we'll talk about that a lot, actually, surprisingly a lot, when we talk about episode 4. You'll know what I'm talking about if you've seen episode 4 of Rings of Power, but we're not here to talk about that right now. There is now confirmed to be a new Lord of the Rings film coming out, live action, I believe, pretty sure. Peter Jackson is going to be on the executive team, which is really exciting. Obviously, you want the visionaries behind the original Lord of the Rings films to be on board. I think Andy Serkis is going to be directing because this film is called The Hunt for Gollum. Lord of the Rings, The Hunt for Gollum. Not really what I would have made my next Lord of the Rings, big return, epic return to the big screen. I would not have made it Hunt for Gollum. I mean, I like Gollum as a character. He's a pretty complicated guy. If you can even call him a guy, I don't even know, creature, person. He's a person. If you know the Lord of the Rings backstory, then you know. It's not, what I would have made my next Lord of the Rings film about, but, maybe they have a really great story they want to tell. Speculation on my part is that it will probably be that period of time between when Gollum lost the ring and when he reappeared at the beginning or the end of Fellowship of the Ring or beginning of Two Towers. I think that this will probably be that period, especially when, because what is the hunt for Gollum, right? Well, I like I mentioned, I've just been rereading the Fellowship of the Ring. I've seen all the movies, of course, but there's a period of time where, Frodo is about to leave the Shire, and Gandalf kind of comes back and he says, I found Gollum, I got information out of him. because after he lost the ring to Bilbo, he then kind of lost his mind a little bit, and the Nazgul, the Black Riders, they got to him, right? And they kind of tortured the word Shire out of him. It's that famous scene in Lord of the Rings where he's screaming, Shire, Baggins, and I think that I believe, at least, that the hunt for Gollum will probably, because, spoiler alert for Return of the King, one of the greatest films of all time, he's dead. I don't know, if they revive him somehow, and it's post Return of the King, I don't even know what to say anymore. And I don't think so, in light of what I'm about to talk about, because, the news here is about a character that also is not in Middle Earth any longer, in canon at least. But anyways, yeah, so I think my speculation is that this film is going to take place in that period of time, sort of in the middle of book one, I suppose, between The Hobbit and then, the first couple chapters of Fellowship of the Ring, where Gollum is sort of on the run. And then I'm sure it'll end sort of him being found by the Nazgul, or him being found by Gandalf, or whatever. Now, speaking of Gandalf, if that is the case, then there is a pretty, I suppose, narratively satisfying way in which you can get Gandalf to come back if the hunt for Gollum involves people hunting for Gollum. Because when Gandalf left the Shire after Bilbo departs for his adventure in Fellowship of the Ring, Gandalf then, stays with Frodo for a little bit, but then departs very quickly and comes back a couple times before Frodo heads off. And in between one of those times is when he is looking for Gollum, right? So could this be Gandalf's hunt for Gollum? Well, Ian McKellen, one of the greatest actors of all time. I love him as Magneto. I love him as Gandalf. He is amazing, 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 amazing. Ian McKellen was speaking with a British magazine, and he had this to say. And I'm going to read out a quote that Ian McKellen said. So, quote, "I've just been told that there are going to be more films and Gandalf will be involved." Okay, so that's interesting. This is me interjecting. That's interesting, right? Because it looks like whether or not Ian McKellen himself will be involved, Gandalf himself will be involved, and we'll see what that kind of leads to. But let me continue on with the quote. So Gandalf will be involved, and they hope that I'll be playing him. McKellen told British Magazine The Big Issue. When? Question mark. I don't know. What the script is? Question mark. It's not written yet, so they better be quick. Now, I mentioned that this makes me a little bit sad. It makes me a little bit sad just purely because Ian McKellen is not getting any younger. I would have loved to have seen him, spoiler alert, in Deadpool and Wolverine. He did not show up there. I really would have loved to have seen him there, but he unfortunately did not make an appearance. That's all good. He's getting older. He just fell off a stage, I believe. Let's give the man a break. He's been just an incredible actor for so long. So long. But with a little bit of de-aging technology, and Gandalf is supposed to be old and wise and everything like that. Who's to say that Gandalf couldn't be in this film, right? I remember watching, I believe it was The Desolation of Smaug, the second Hobbit film, and Christopher Lee showed up as Saruman, which was, he clearly was kind of getting up there. I believe he was 90-something years old. I don't think Ian McKellen is that old yet, but getting there. But they kind of they accommodated everything to make it comfortable. You can tell Christopher Lee was really, really getting up there. It wasn't the same guy who played Count Dooku and Saruman in the original trilogy, but it was still just really nice to see him again. So it looks like Gandalf will have a role in the hunt for Gollum, and it looks like it'll be a pretty substantial one, more than just what Christopher Lee did for the Hobbit film. And it looks like if they get the script in time, because again, just the sad reality of life is that Ian McKellen is not getting any younger. And so even, God forbid he passes away, but, it's just, if he's still with us, hopefully for many, many, many years to come. But he, I just think the more time passes, the less it will be appealing to him to kind of have to sit in the makeup chair for that long and, wear all the robes and do all that kind of stuff. So we'll see. We'll see about that. But if he does come back, I'd be very, very excited for it. I'm still a little bit iffy on the premise of this film. And again, it's all speculation. No one's really said anything about what the actual premise of this film is. But, I would just speculate that it's because Gandalf is going to be involved, that it's going to be that period just at the beginning of Fellowship of the Ring. But we'll have to see about that. So let me know in the comments down below if you're excited for Hunt for Gollum, and if you'd be more excited or less excited if Ian McKellen came back as Gandalf. Let me know in the comments down below. All right, guys, so we've already been talking for quite a while about a lot of different amazing and interesting things that have been going on in the movie and TV space, but we have 4 more topics to go here, and this one's really interesting because this one comes from a scooper, quote unquote. And I talked about scoop culture. There were a lot of scoops about Deadpool and Wolverine that just did not come true, and these scoopers, what I would propose is that it would be a good thing to keep Not that we have to, like rise up against the Scroop culture or whatever, because we're talking about something that a Scrooper said here, right? And I'm not talking about it. I just want to be clear. This is not news. This is just me saying a Scrooper who gets some things right for sure. Like they got some things right for Deadpool and Wolverine. So a Scrooper who gets some things right, said something about Marvel, and let's talk about what if that were the case, right? And so I'm not saying, rise up against Scoop culture or whatever, but I am saying that it would just be nice to kind of backtrack sometimes and say they don't get everything right. And so let's not just take everything at their word. But a Scooper, Daniel RPK, who, reveals a lot of things, has said something very interesting about the MCU. In particular, he says that Armor Wars and Blade are in doubt, and over the next few months, Marvel will decide their fate. Now, let's talk about Blade first, because we've been talking about Blade literally for 3 years. We've been talking about Blade. And that's because Blade has been in development hell for 3 years, right? And it's still in development hell because we don't have a director yet. We don't have a script yet. And that's what I wanted to touch on here, is the last thing we heard from other reliable reports a couple months ago is that Blade, who just ditched its writer and director again, I believe, is now, or I think it just hired Eric Pearson to do some either rewrites or touch-ups on the script or whatever, who just wrote, Thunderbolts and did a lot of writing for a lot of other MCU projects and kind of was a ghostwriter for a lot of other MCU projects. They've tapped Eric Pearson to write the script. We still don't have a director. And I believe the last we heard was the hope was we'd have a script and a director by the end of the year and hopefully head into production sometime next year. Whether or not they were even targeting that November 2025 date, I don't even know. But the point is, we might have a draft of a script written by Eric Pearson floating around somewhere. We have drafts of many different scripts that, many different writers have written for Blade. But, the current writer, who knows, right? Who knows if we have a draft of a script going on. And I think that that's the key, is that if we don't even have a draft of a script and we have, if we have nothing really going on there, would it be that difficult to kill Blade? Now, let's look at it this way. Mahershala Ali, I think, is probably getting extremely impatient with the MCU. And, for however long he wanted to play Blade, I think that, by the day, by the hour, by the year, it's just growing more in doubt for him that anything is ever going to happen, because he was the one who really wanted this to happen. It was him. Now, in terms of the MCU continuity, I mean, we heard his voice at the end of Eternals, but we're not getting an Eternal sequel. He could still show up as Blade, but that's not what he wanted to do. He wanted to be Blade in a Blade film, right? And so I think that just makes it really interesting to think about, whether or not he's in a position to say, if Kevin Feige walked up to him and said, look, Mahershala, I'm so sorry. We tried our absolute best. We wanted to make this the best film we can. It's not happening anymore. It just doesn't fit anymore. And I wonder if he'd be at a place where he says, no, I want you to keep pushing for it, or if he's like, let's just part ways amicably. We'll see. But I think Blade is in an interesting place. The other project that Daniel RPK mentioned is Armor Wars. And Armor Wars is interesting to me because at first it was a show, and now it's a movie. And it's never been really talked about ever since its official announcement, right? We had we got a logo for it like 3 years ago at some investor call, and then that logo changed, and now Don Cheadle, it's going to be a movie with Don Cheadle. And I don't even know what to make of this film. Now, kind of the sad reality about this, if both of these films were axed, is that, these are led by two dynamic actors, right? And not to mention that, another narrative that I'm sure a lot of toxic fans are going to be, like cheering in the streets about, which I think is just a terrible thing. But these are two of not just the best actors, but two really talented Black actors, right, working in Hollywood. And I think that, look, I think Marvel is doing a lot to increase their diversity, but, a lot of their projects are still led by white males, right? Obviously, you have your Thors of the world who are still hanging out. Obviously, Hulk is still hanging out here. They're doing better, though. They're doing better. But I think that just to axe these and then have, Fantastic Four, which I'm really looking forward to Fantastic Four, all white cast. So I'm not to get, too much into that, because I know a lot of toxic fans are going to really, jump on me and jump on a lot of people for that. But I think it would be really a bummer and really not a great thing, if we lost not just two great actors in lead roles for these two films, Armor Wars and Blade with Mahershala Ali, who is an two-time Academy Award winning actor, and Don Cheadle, who has done amazing work as well in his own right. It would be really sad to lose two films that were led by two of the most dynamic actors that are working today. Now, on the flip side, on a completely unrelated note, if Kevin Feige looks at his slate and he goes, okay, we have a story we're telling here. Fantastic Four is so clearly setting up Avengers Doomsday because it's the Fantastic Four, and the villain of Doomsday and Secret Wars is Doctor Doom. So, duh. And then, on the other hand, Captain America Brave New World and Thunderbolts, it's all streamlining, right? Because those two films seem like they're very much related to one another, and it looks like they're going to be touching on, okay, who's in the Avengers? Like, what is the Avengers? What's going on here? Dark Avengers? I don't even know. Red Hulk in both of them? Maybe. So, okay, we have that going on in the movie side. And if Kevin Feige says, okay, I have a plan for Shang-Chi 2, which I hope is coming. I really hope is coming. And he says, I have a plan for Shang-Chi 2, and the rings are going to be important to Doctor Doom. They were going to be important to Kang, whatever. Important to Doctor Doom. Doctor Strange 3, probably very important. Spider-Man 4, probably. We're getting crowded. We're getting more crowded. And then we have our 2 Avengers films coming up in a couple years, right? And if Kevin Feige just looks at that and says, guys, I don't know. I just don't know. Like, in Phase 4, I would have loved to have made these films, he might say. But now, I just don't know how it fits in the story. Then on that note, I could more, I could more understand why Kevin Feige would be reluctant to move forward with these films. Again, I think, like I said, I'm of two minds of this, right? Because I love these actors, and I love Don Cheadle as War Machine in that role. Although, like I've talked about this before, we can totally just retcon the whole he was a Skrull since Civil War. It doesn't have to be since Civil War. He was just wearing a hospital gown, which I think that director wanted it to be from Civil War. I think that's a terrible idea. Terrible idea. It can be after Endgame. That's fine. I think that's much better. And Mahershala Ali obviously losing that kind of talent in the MCU is it would really suck. But look, I mean, if we're gonna focus on streamlining the MCU story, then I'm not gonna be thrilled about it, But I think that as long as we get that cohesiveness in those stories, and it's not like Kevin Feige is just axing them for the sake of axing them, then I think that it's like, okay, let's see what you got, Kevin. Is I think what I'm in the mindset of. Like, let's see what you got. Let's see how you're going to move forward with this, and let's go from there. So yeah, I mean, I'm a little torn about this because I would have loved to have seen those actors play those roles in those movies, but I also understand that the MCU is not in a place right now where it can just make Eternals 2 just willy-nilly, even though I would want Eternals 2, really, would very much want Eternals 2. So yeah, we'll have to see about that. But let me know in the comments down below, would you, if you were in Kevin Feige's position, would you want to keep moving forward with Armor Wars or Blade? It's not like they're confirmed, like I said. This isn't confirmation of anything. It's just, speculation that these 2 films are going to be axed. This is just a rumor. So let me know in the comments down below what you think about that. All right, let's talk about Minecraft. Something that I'm sure I must have talked about it at least once or twice, just maybe to talk about this movie or to talk about the game in general in relation to something random. But let's talk about Minecraft, something that I'm sure I've very rarely touched upon on this YouTube channel. Minecraft is obviously a game that I'm sure almost everyone has either watched someone play or someone has, you've played yourself. It's one of those games that kind of just transcends everything, right? It's so universal. It's become one of the biggest games. It's not one of those sort of first-person shooter kind of games that's quote-unquote, the gaming community plays a lot of or whatever. It's just a game that, I've played a lot of myself, just with friends and just had a good time with it. It's a really fun game to be creative and to do all these kinds of things. It really is what I said at the beginning. It's virtual Lego kind of on steroids. It's, you can build whatever you want. You can, destroy it at the whim of, on a whim if you want. It's a really fun kind of imaginative look at a survival game, also with a creative side to it as well. So really, really fun game. When they announced they were going to be making a movie, I had the same reaction that I did when they announced they were going to be making a Lego movie, that's crazy. I don't understand. The Lego movie, it turns out, is one of my favorite movies. I suppose one of the biggest pleasant surprises that I'd ever seen. It was a really fantastic movie. I haven't seen that movie in a long time, but I'd be willing to bet, just based on what I remember from that film, that it holds up. It's a really wonderful film that is surprisingly heartfelt at the end as well. So I really like the Lego movie, and they were able to do a lot that was inventive with it. So ever since the Lego movie, when these concepts come out, and there have been a lot of knockoff concepts, like the Emoji Movie, that did not turn out well. Barbie, I suppose, was kind of in that vein, although I think it ended up going in a very different direction, so I'm not going to count that. But, there are a lot of properties that take these kind of cartoony video games, and cartoony is not a bad word. It's just, sort of colorfully animated properties, and turn them into movies based on video games or toys or whatever. So Minecraft, when they announced they were going to be making a movie, I kind of thought, okay, that's fine. I personally just don't see it, but they can surprise me just like they surprised me with the Lego movie. So we finally got our first trailer for the Minecraft movie, and I have just really one big question about all of this. Why is this not completely CG animated? You made a Super Mario Bros. Film, and you learned your lesson from the 1980s film with Bob Hoskins. Poor guy, and poor everybody who worked on that film. Because, oh my gosh, just the images from that film, some of the Koopas and Bowser. Anyways, you made a completely CG animated Mario film, and it's not the greatest film to ever exist, but it's fun. It's really fun, and for me, who grew up playing Nintendo, it's really, really nostalgic. It's really fun. So why did we have to... I get that the avatars of Steve and Alex or whatever in Minecraft are kind of generic if they were just transplanted directly from their character models. Obviously, you'd have to change something like, if you thought about a Lego figure, right? The Lego figure that Emmett is based off of, sort of the generic construction worker. I mean, you'd have to animate, expression on their faces, right? So, fine, whatever, do that. My question is, why does it look like just a bunch of actors walking around on a green screen? I mean, you want to talk about the volume. No, this is like real 3D people walking in a very 2D plane. And it just doesn't really work. It feels like everything is being composited together. Who knows? They might have built all these sets for real, but it doesn't really change the aesthetic of what's being pictured here. It just looks like people by people, I mean Jason Momoa and Danielle Brooks, amongst others. We'll talk about Jack Black in just a second. Walking around really fake environments and just saying random things that don't even feel like Minecraft. The llama joke at the end, I don't get how it was a joke. It was just a llama. Like, what am I supposed to take out of that? So just really strange, honestly, in that regard. On top of that, nothing about it felt incredibly Minecraft that was related to the people. I know that there were a couple scenes where Jason Momoa, who's playing Alex, I think, is crafting something. Okay, I guess. I think the rest of the trailer that was animated looked pretty okay. It looked like a good backdrop for a entirely different Minecraft movie. But I mean, then Steve Jobs, I almost said Steve Jobs. Then Jack Black shows up as Steve, and it's like, okay, why? And he goes, I am Steve, and it's like, okay. I mean, if you play Minecraft, you get the reference, but to call it a joke would be, I think, very far-fetched. So yeah, I mean, I would say this for the Minecraft movie trailer. I'm not saying, I don't think that the trailer upset me, or the trailer was a bad trailer, because I've seen trailers that I just dislike immediately. The trailers are only a couple minutes long, and I've seen trailers where I go, oh no, and those movies could end up being really good. So who knows? This trailer might be kind of a middling, questionable, crazy trailer to a really good movie. I don't know. I'll probably see the movie anyway, so we'll see. But really, my biggest emotion after seeing this trailer is just confusion. I don't get any of the choices that were made. The things that were supposed to be jokes were not funny at all. And you get A-list actors. I mean, A-list in the sense of, big stars like Jason Momoa and Jack Black, and Danielle Brooks is really good in Peacemaker. Really liked her in Peacemaker. What is the movie? What's the point of the movie? I just don't understand. So yeah, I mean, you'll have to let me know in the comments down below. Maybe you guys really love the trailer, and maybe I'm just crazy out here. So I don't know. I would be really, really curious to hear what you guys have to say about this Minecraft movie trailer. So let me know in comments down below, because I'm confused. And speaking of confusion, let's talk about Rings of Power episode 4. So this is going to be a full spoiler discussion of the Rings of Power episode 4. I did a full spoiler discussion of the first 3 episodes, which dropped last week. You can go check it out there. But just to quickly summarize my thoughts on the first 3 episodes, I thought that there was a lot of promise in those first 3 episodes, particularly, honestly, primarily in episode 1, because episode 1 focused on the one storyline that really should be the front and center storyline in Rings of Power, which is Sauron and his rise to power. Spoiler alert, we didn't really see any of Sauron in episode 4. Whoops. We'll talk about all that sort of stuff later on. But yeah, I think episode 1 was a really promising start to see, how he became Halbrand, and then how he, is manipulating the elves, and working in the shadows. By the way, working in the shadows doesn't mean you have 0 screen time. It just means you don't have to be fighting people hand to hand all the time. Anyways, I digress. And then episode 2 I thought was a little bit dull. That was really the episode with Durin. And then episode 3, kind of the same, but a little more promising. I'm not on board with the Arondir and Theo Isildur storyline, which we'll get to that in just a second. But after watching episodes 1, 2, and 3, I went, okay, so this is an interesting show because I see the potential. And to be fair, in season 1, I just didn't see the potential. From episode 1, I was like, I'm going to keep watching because I'm a Lord of the Rings fan and I have to keep watching. I don't have to keep watching any of these. I do. I keep watching them because I'm a Lord of the Rings fan. Like you heard me talk about Gollum for 10 minutes, right? So I'm a fan of these properties. I just, nothing in season 1 really captivated me. And so season 2, I will say it's off to a better start because the Sauron plot was definitely captivating for sure. And so I was like, okay, I think we were heading in a dangerous direction, shall we say, from episode 1 to episode 3. Let's see what happens in episode 4. So Rings of Power episode 4 comes along. And guys, we're right back to season 1. This episode was boring. It was about characters I didn't care about. It was about storylines that I didn't care about. And I hate just being negative on here because you guys know I go into all these different things. The Minecraft movie trailer, as an example, with an open mind, because I want to be surprised. I want to like things. It's my own fault, not my own fault per se, but it's on me, right? If I just go into something not wanting to like it, yeah, it is my own fault. If I go into something not wanting to like it, and I end up not liking it because I'm just stubborn and I'm ignorant, and I say I'm not going to like this because I don't want to like it, even if it's good, right? That's not the mentality I have here on this channel. I made a video a long time ago talking about why I think we're watching movies wrong, just trying to go in and be critical all the time, which I've seen a lot of online. That's not who I am. But if I don't like something, I'm not going to delude myself and lie to myself and say that was the best thing I've ever seen. It's like because I want to know what I like and what I don't like. And I didn't like this episode. I think that it was focusing on all the storylines that I really don't care too much about. Maybe say for Galadriel and Elrond, which I also think that storyline is getting a little dull without any kind of Sauron-y influence going on there. I mean, the ring, sure. Like the ring is influencing them, I guess, in a certain way, but whatever. So there's that. But yeah, I mean, I like it starts out, the episode starts out with the ring really starting to corrupt Galadriel. And they have this kind of confrontation, her and Elrond, and talking about whether they should, listen to what Galadriel has to say or not. Turns out Galadriel is kind of right, I guess, in the sense that there was danger. By the way, full spoiler discussion, full spoiler alert. I mentioned this at the beginning, but in case you haven't seen the episode, this is, full spoilers ahead. So anyways, and yeah, I like that was somewhat interesting. And then we pivot to the stranger who is, it's Gandalf. It's Gandalf. It is Gandalf. Why they keep insisting on calling him the stranger, I don't know. And by the way, does anyone else, I said it last week, and I said it kind of hesitantly. I was like, well, it could be Saruman, that dark wizard, speaking of Christopher Lee. It could be Saruman. Who knows? Does anyone not think it's Saruman anymore? It's so clearly Saruman, right? If they pull something crazy like that's actually Radagast, which, okay, fine, whatever. But no, it is so clearly Saruman, which, by the way, that's not a bad thing. I mean, I'm just saying, like, why are we keeping secrets from the audience like that? It's you reveal Tom Bombadil, which I'm sure made all of the OG book readers, really, really excited, who love Tom Bombadil. And it's really ironic because I guess I'll finish by talking about Saruman really quickly. Just to say that I don't think it's a bad thing that it's Saruman. I think that there could be a really interesting storyline here with the Clash of Wizards, and somehow Gandalf is going to have to trust Saruman if it's really him, because they're on good terms at the beginning of Fellowship of the Ring. Gandalf really trusts him, and then that's where the whole betrayal stuff happens. So I don't know. I mean, maybe you just see him behind the scenes meeting Sauron, and then they kind of form maybe that's the point. You see them forming that alliance while he's manipulating Gandalf or something. I don't know. If it's not Saruman and Gandalf, I don't even know. Like who could they possibly be? I mean, other than just random characters. But if they're just random characters at this point, not at the beginning of the show. Like at the beginning of the show, they can be whoever they want to be. At this point, it's so clear who they are, I think, in my opinion, that it's like if they're not, then I don't even know where we go from here. So there is that. But yeah, all that to say, you know, I'm interested. I was more interested in that subplot of like, maybe this is how the Wizard Council forms. And so I actually thought Tom Bombadil, I thought that was Radagast for a second. I was like, oh yeah, all the wizards are showing up. Sure. Turns out it's Tom Bombadil. And what's interesting is that, like I mentioned, I've actually just coincidentally started to reread Lord of the Rings Fellowship of the Ring, and I actually just finished the section with Tom Bombadil. So all the little references they were making to Goldberry, is that her name? The woman who's with him, who sings songs all the time. You don't really see Goldberry in this episode, but you kind of hear her, I believe. I got all the references for sure. It didn't really, you know, spark any joy into me because, yeah, Tom Bombadil in the books as well. Maybe this is sacrilegious. I apologize if it is. He's a really, really strange character. In the books, I didn't even remember this, but he puts on the ring. Like Frodo just hands him the one ring to try on, and he tries it on, and nothing happens. And it's just the weirdest scene, just the strangest scene I've seen, you know, read in a long time. So he's there. Yeah, I mean, somehow he's going to train, because he alludes to the fact that he trained the Dark Wizard, Saruman, I guess, and I guess he's going to train Gandalf. That's kind of interesting. But again, what does this have to do with Sauron? Not much. I mean, I'm sure it's building to a Gandalf and Sauron confrontation at some point, and I'm sure it's building towards a Saruman and Sauron alliance at some point. But it's like, where are we driving at? You know, you don't really see Sauron interacting with these guys. And it's so weird. On top of that, you have the Nori Poppy subplot where they're with this guy called Nobody. Literally, his name is Nobody, I guess. Full disclosure, by the way, I was watching this pretty late at night, and so I was falling in and out of sleep a little bit. But also, I mean, I've seen shows, you know, in similar conditions, and that have kept me captivated and hooked, and really wanting, you know, left me wanting for more. This episode, I could hardly stay awake for, because all these subplots, all these things, I just don't really care about. I mean, even the stuff about, you know, Elrond and Galadriel in the forest, they're fighting, Barrow Wights. And that's also actually a deep cut to the books, because Frodo, I don't believe it's in the movie. I could be wrong. I haven't seen the movies in a while. But Frodo in the books is attacked by a Barrow Wight before he meets Tom Bombadil. So I'm like, okay, another thing that I get now, I guess. I quote unquote get, because it seems like they're just putting these things in here for the sake of putting them in here. And then at the end, you know, I guess Sauron's busy because, you know, whatever, he's not doing anything. And then there are these kind of I guess they're Ents kind of creatures with Arondir and Theo. I don't care at all about Arondir and Theo. Just make the story, if you're going to make the story about anyone, make it about Isildur, just purely for the sake about, because we know as Lord of the Rings fans that he has an important role to play in that final battle where Sauron is vanquished, right? So yeah, I mean, like, you know, especially Theo, I don't even understand why we're still focusing on this character. Arondir is cool, but the actor just, like, he's kind of, you know, mistaking ethereal and mysterious for dull, in my opinion, because the actor who's playing him is just not interesting. And then, you know, at the end of the show, end of the episode, Galadriel gets captured by Adar, and it's like, okay, great. I frankly don't really care that much about anything that happened to her. So, guys, look, I mean, I will be right back on board. Not right back on board. I'll be more excited next episode, or whatever episode, because I'm going to finish the show. But it's, you know, I just, I'll be more excited about it if Sauron comes back, which is a really odd and weird thing to say. And, you know, before I had seen the show, this new season, I would have been like, that's a weird thing to say. But truly, he is the most interesting part of this entire series. Truly the most interesting thing. So there's that. But if we just keep going on these subplots that don't seem to make sense, and to be fair, critics for this show have seen all 8 episodes, and you know, a decent amount of them seem to have liked it. So I'm not giving up hope on the show. I'm just saying that episode 1, really good. If the whole season was like that, I would have really liked the show, if not loved the show. Episode 2, kind of dull. Not as boring as most episodes in season 1, but kind of dull. Episode 3, okay, is what I said last week. It was fine. It was good. This episode is right back to season 1 quality. It's boring. It's not terribly made, in my opinion, but it's just so dull, and it's about characters I don't care about at all. So I'm going to wait for the next episode. I'm going to watch it, but man, it reminds me of those shows where you're like, get to the point, right? Get to the point. And if this show does not get back on that Sauron plot, I don't know. I don't know. So we'll be talking about Rings of Power every week because, and we'll have a lot to talk about in a couple weeks. Like I mentioned last week, we'll have, I think, a couple weeks where Rings of Power, Agatha, and Penguin are going on at the same time. So we'll have a lot to talk about in that time. And who knows? Maybe I'll stop talking about Rings of Power if it's still continuing in that direction, or maybe it'll be my maybe it'll be my favorite show out of the three. But yeah, you'll have to let me know, guys, if you watched Rings of Power season 2, episode 4, and what you thought about it in the comments down below. And finally, our final segment of today's podcast. Like I said, it's a long podcast today, but there's just so much to talk about, and I'm really excited to talk about all these different things with you. Now, this one is really interesting. There have been some really positive things to talk about on this episode of Access Blockbusters Pod, and there have been some things that I haven't, enjoyed as much. Rings of Power, Minecraft trailer, etc. This is something that falls in the middle, because the first reviews for Joker 2, Joker Folie Deux have come out, and they're not that positive. I would have expected, and to be fair, I didn't remember this. I remember that Joker 1 had a Rotten Tomato score that wasn't as high as most other Oscar-nominated films do. And I didn't remember, to be fair, that film had a 69% Rotten Tomato score, because that's not high at all, especially for a film nominated for Best Picture. So in hindsight, right now, the reviews, I'm on Rotten Tomatoes right now, and what we're gonna do in this segment is we're gonna read through the little blurbs, of these, because I also am in the position where I don't want to know much about these films, and I found that if I read more reviews, people just kind of inadvertently spoil things and reveal things. So we're just gonna read the little blurbs that they put out, some of them, for Joker Folie Deux. But right now, I'm on the Rotten Tomatoes page. It's coming out on October 4th. So actually, these reviews are pretty early for this film. And it has a 61% on Rotten Tomatoes, which is fresh, barely, but it's not really outstanding. So it's just interesting to hear about that, because this was a film that, obviously the first one makes $1 billion. And I don't think, if I had to guess, this film makes $500 million, maybe. I could be wrong. This film might just make $3 billion for all I know, because the first film I would have thought would have made like $300 million. So it made $1 billion, and it just blew my expectations out of the water. We'll have to see what this second film does in terms of box office, but I don't really know what to expect, and I really don't know. I'm even more confused now, because the reviews have come out. For some reviews have come out, and they're fine. Like, some are really positive. A lot are pretty middling on the film, and a good few are pretty critical of the movie. So I'm just going to go through, read some fresh ones, and then we'll transition to some, or we'll just kind of read them as we go, because I think it's a pretty decent mix. I'll read a couple fresh, and then we'll go to a couple rotten, and we'll kind of go that way. So let's see. This first one up here that I'm going to read is from, let's do Screen Rant first. So Screen Rant actually wrote a positive review, and the little blurb says, "It seems like Todd Phillips targeted Folie Deux directly at the audience who got a little too into Joker and made it to antagonize them." Sorry, I can't read today. I think that's interesting. It also, Screen Rant also gave it a 3.5 out of 5, which is not, because these little blurbs aren't always just about what they think about the film. It's sort of just what they think will be little pithy things to write. So 3.5 out of 5, not the best. Let's move on to the next fresh review. "We're left with the tragedy of a broken man in a world only interested in sensationalism. It's a big swing for all involved, but all the better for it." So this one is pretty positive, right? 4 out of 5. Next one is rotten. "It begs the question, why is Phillips so reluctant to embrace that this film is a musical? Why not add a little more color, some flourish to the production design?" That's interesting, because one of the bigger swings that we thought this film was going to take was that it's going to be very musical adjacent. Todd Phillips has always, been on record of saying this isn't a musical, but music is going to be a very heavy part, big emphasis of the film. So I'm very curious to hear that this is not a traditional, or it's not leaning into the musical part of it as much as we thought. Next review is also rotten. It says, "It is not that this version of Joker is inherently wrong, but it is uninteresting. Please let us be done with this." So that's a big yikes, right? 2 more positive reviews, and then I'll read 2 more negative reviews, and we'll kind of discuss what all these are kind of talking about in totality. So this is a positive review, and it says, "It seems like Todd Phillips..." Oh, excuse me, I just read that one. Let's read another positive one. It says, "It feels remarkably honest and true to itself." Okay. That's pretty good. "Demonstrating again that taking such a popular character seriously is nothing to laugh at." Okay, pretty good, right? That's not bad. Let's read another positive one. "Folie Deux can't quite match its predecessor for dizzying impact, but it matches it for horrible tinderbox tension. That's a really interesting turn of phrase there. Tinderbox tension. I wonder what that is referring to. But I mean, I guess the first film had a lot of tension in it. Whether or not you liked it, it had a lot of tense moments in it. So anyways, continuing on with this. It's a film you feel might burst into flames at any given moment. I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing. I'm assuming that's a good thing, right? Let's read another positive one. Joker still has a trick up his sleeve. Even a serious subtext, which I think we all kind of assume that this Joker film, I mean, the first one had some serious undertones, really serious topics to deal with. So I think we all assume that this one would have that as well. Anyways, this continues. The best moment comes late on in an incredible scene, I think is what they meant to say. So that's interesting. Let's read a couple more negative reviews, little blurbs, and then we'll talk about what they all kind of represent. So this one just says an overindulgent musical. So this one says it's a musical. An overindulgent musical that lacks the punch of its predecessor. Ouch. Okay. Let's find one more negative one. This one says Phillips is just incapable of delivering the genre's requisite razzle dazzle that would surely complement Joker's persona. Now, this negative review, I haven't seen the film, and maybe I would say the exact same thing. That review, though, feels like it just kind of misunderstands, and I haven't read the whole review, to be fair, but it just kind of feels like it misunderstands what this film is trying to do in subverting the genre. But yeah, we it has a 61%. So you're going to read 6 positive reviews, and then you're going to read 4 negative ones. It's a wide mix of reviews that, frankly, run the gamut of this is insanely original. It has something very serious and important to say, to this is boring and trite, and we should just get over it, and we should stop making films like this, which I think is so weird and so such an odd, eclectic mix. And I suppose, should we have expected anything less? I mean, honestly, I was expecting, more critical acclaim from this film. But to say that, look, I mean, this is a film that, like, you some people think they got it, and some people just are like, there's nothing to get here. I think kind of strangely matches with the character of the Joker. Now, with my personal anticipation, I was not the biggest fan of the first Joker. I understood what it was going for, and I appreciated Joaquin Phoenix's performance very much, although I still maintain Adam Driver for Marriage Story should have won Best Actor. Not to say Joaquin Phoenix did a bad job. He did an amazing job. But I was never the biggest fan of the first Joker film. And so when they were making a sequel, I thought you got to make it different, like make it something that's worth our while. And I thought the trailers really did that. I thought the trailers for Joker Folie Deux were quite impressive, leaning into the wackiness, the music, and everything like that. But to hear these reviews are a little bit discouraging. I'm still going to go in with pretty much the same expectations, so just an open mind and be like, okay, surprise me is really what it is at the end of the day. But I'm not going to lie and say that these reviews really raised my expectations. They didn't. I'm just very curious to see what kind of film Todd Phillips has cooked up for us. So we'll see Joker Folie Deux in about a month, and I'll give my review and we'll talk about it then. But guys, let me know in the comments down below, what are you thinking about Joker Folie Deux' first reviews? Are you excited by some of the more positive ones? Are you discouraged by the negative ones? Let me know in the comments down below. And guys, that will conclude one of the longer episodes of Access Blockbusters Pod. If you have made it all the way to the end, thank you so much for doing so and spending some time with me talking about all these different topics. And please, I keep saying it at the end of every segment because, I take those segments and I post them as clips on the YouTube channel. I say it at the end of every segment because I think it's important to me. Please comment down below with your thoughts. I respond to almost all of them. I really enjoy interacting with you guys, and I just love, talking about these things. And so, let me know what you think about the podcast. Give the video a like, subscribe to the Access Blockbusters YouTube channel. And with that, guys, thank you so much. Access Blockbusters episode 39. I will see you guys in the next one.